The Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club thought they ruled the quiet roads of Montana's Paradise Valley, running their criminal empire with impunity from their heavily fortified compound. They had already corrupted local law enforcement, established control over key trafficking routes, and built a ruthless reputation that kept the locals in constant fear. But when they decided to kidnap Sarah Mitchell, a young veterinary student who accidentally witnessed one of their operations, they made a fatal mistake. What the Iron Serpents didn't know was that Sarah's uncle, James "Ghost" Cooper, wasn't really running a peaceful cattle ranch for the past 7 years. He was a former Delta Force Army Ranger, whose legendary exploits in Afghanistan's deadliest valleys had earned him near-mythical status among special operations veterans. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the Mitchell family ranch as Sarah tended to a sick horse in the stable, her hands moving with practiced precision while checking vital signs. 20 hours into her veterinary school rotation at her uncle's ranch, exhaustion pulled at her edges, but her focus never wavered. The ranch's isolation had always felt peaceful, a perfect place for hands-on learning about large animal care. But today, something felt different. Through the stable's dusty windows, she caught glimpses of unfamiliar motorcycles making another slow pass along the property's border. The bikes' thundering engines had become increasingly common over the past week, their riders' intentions unclear but menacing. The ranch's gravel road kicked up dust as Jessica Watson, the local sheriff, pulled up in her patrol car, her usual friendly demeanor carrying an edge of tension that Sarah had noticed more frequently lately. "Sarah," Watson called out, her voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "The county board would like to discuss some new regulations about veterinary practices in the area. Your uncle around?" Sarah noticed the sheriff's slight hesitation before adding, "Perhaps we could review the paperwork now?" The stable's heavy doors creaked open as more students arrived for their rotation. Sarah immersed herself in teaching protocols, but she couldn't miss the conversation floating through the partially open door to the ranch office. "The board is concerned about certain patterns," Watson was saying. "The Iron Serpents security consultants have identified several areas where our local oversight could be more flexible." Sarah focused on demonstrating proper injection techniques for a new vaccine trial, her hands steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. Last week, she'd refused to sign off on transport papers for several horses when Watson had insisted it was for the county's benefit. The animal's behavior had suggested professional training for drug transport, rather than typical ranch work. "Sarah," her uncle's voice cut through her concentration, "your shift ended an hour ago. Get some rest." James Cooper's weathered face carried the quiet strength she'd known all her life, though something in his eyes seemed more alert than usual. "Just need to finish these charts," Sarah replied, though exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. The ranch office seemed longer than usual as Sarah made her way to the staff room. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger sister Emily, currently doing aid work in South America. The distance between them had grown over the past few years, filled with vague stories about remote villages and poor internet connections. The parking area loomed ahead, its shadows deeper than usual in the fading light. Sarah's old Jeep sat alone in the far corner, where she always parked to leave closer spaces for students. The distant rumble of motorcycles drew her attention to a group of bikes that had followed her from the hospital. Sarah's heart hammered as she recognized the Iron Serpents colors. "Miss Mitchell." The voice carried across the lot, smooth as aged whiskey but with an unmistakable edge of menace. Marcus Kane emerged from the shadows, his leather cut displaying the Iron Serpents president patch. Two men flanked him, their professional posture suggesting military or law enforcement background. "I was hoping we might discuss your recent documentation decisions." Sarah's grip tightened on her keys. "My shift is over, Mr. Kane. Any questions about animal records should go through proper channels." Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come now, Sarah. May I call you Sarah? We're all interested in the same thing, the smooth operation of this fine valley. Your attention to detail is admirable, but sometimes perfect accuracy can be problematic." "Proper documentation is non-negotiable," Sarah stated firmly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "The animal's welfare comes first." Everything is negotiable. Kane stepped closer, his cologne failing to mask a predatory aura. Your sister Emily, for instance. Such important work she does abroad. It would be tragic if something were to happen in one of those dangerous regions she visits. Sarah's blood ran cold. The threat was clear, but something else nagged at her mind. How did Kane know about Emily's international work? Even Sarah wasn't sure exactly where her sister was stationed these days. Think carefully about your next few shifts, Kane continued. Certain animals will be arriving with very specific conditions. Their records will need to reflect the correct versions of events. I trust you'll make the appropriate adjustments. He turned away, his expensive boots clicking against the gravel. Just before reaching his bike, he paused. Oh, and Sarah. Let's keep this conversation between us. Involving your uncle or anyone else would be unfortunate. Sarah waited until the bike's engines faded into the distance before letting out a shaky breath. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Emily about a remote clinic in some undisclosed location. Looking at her sister's text about her aid work in an unnamed region, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Emily's absence than she knew. Through the evening shadows, she didn't notice the small red light blinking on the prototype security camera recently installed in the parking lot's corner. A camera that had just transmitted its footage to a secure server monitored by someone very interested in Marcus Kane's movements. 200 miles away from the Mitchell Ranch, in a nondescript office building in Denver, Emily Mitchell studied the security footage of her sister's confrontation with Marcus Kane. Her desk was stripped bare except for 3 monitors displaying different angles of the parking lot encounter. 7 years of deep cover work investigating the Iron Serpents criminal network, and now her carefully constructed operation was at risk because they targeted her sister. They're escalating faster than anticipated. Agent David Torres leaned against her desk, his DEA credentials hanging loosely from his neck. Kane doesn't usually get personally involved in ranch operations. Emily's jaw tightened as she rewound the footage, studying Kane's body language. He's under pressure. The weapons division must be behind schedule. She pulled up a complex spreadsheet of horse transport records she'd been tracking across 3 states. They're using the Mitchell Ranch as a distribution hub, but something's not going according to plan. Back in Montana, Sarah started her morning rounds with the weight of Kane's threat sitting heavy on her shoulders. The ranch was unusually busy, a steady stream of horses with injuries that set off warning bells in her experienced mind. 3 more injuries from the same trail, Sarah reported to her uncle during rounds, all with similar stress patterns in their legs. But according to our transport records, we never cleared those routes. James Cooper pulled her into an empty stall, checking carefully before closing the door. The board is implementing new documentation protocols tomorrow, he said quietly. Direct orders from the county. All veterinary cases need to go through a special review process before being entered into the system. They're creating delays to modify records, Sarah realized, the pattern becoming clear. Her uncle's weathered face carried a warning she'd rarely seen. Be careful accessing the transport logs, he whispered. I've seen what happens to staff who ask too many questions. 3 ranch hands transferred suddenly last month. Their documentation disappeared from our systems the next day. Hours passed without James returning. Sarah noticed Sheriff Watson making multiple trips to the main office, each time looking more distressed. Through careful observation, she began mapping the pattern of motorcycle patrols, shift changes, communication methods. The transport logs had revealed more than just fraud. Hidden in mundane spreadsheets was evidence of a larger operation. Coordinated horse movements, systematic drug concealment, and complex money laundering through ranch expenses. A young stable hand, eyes darting nervously, caught Sarah's attention between rounds. Be careful checking the transport records, he whispered. They installed something in the system. It tracks everyone who views certain files. Before Sarah could respond, one of Kane's men appeared. The stable hand quickly busied himself with routine tasks, fear evident in his rigid posture. The ranch's afternoon brought more suspicious cases. Sarah treated a horse with injuries consistent with smuggling operations, stressed leg muscles, systematic bruising. But the admission papers listed it as a routine training accident. Sheriff Watson appeared during lunch break, her professional smile more strained than usual. Sarah, dear, About your recent veterinary cases, Watson began. The board feels your documentation is becoming unnecessarily detailed. We're implementing a new, streamlined system. The sheriff's hand shook slightly as she placed a stack of new forms on the desk. The board's decision is final. Mr. Kane's security consulting firm will be conducting a thorough review of all department protocols. Watson hesitated, something like guilt flickering across her face. Sometimes survival requires compromise, Sarah. The Valley needs this partnership. In Denver, Emily's team was mapping out the syndicate's ranch network. They've infiltrated 7 major ranches across the Northwest, she explained to her DEA handler. But the Mitchell property is different. The volume of disappeared horses doesn't match their usual patterns. They're using it for something bigger. A young analyst rushed in with fresh data. Agent Mitchell, we found something in the county board's financial records. 3 members received massive offshore payments the day before voting to approve Kane's security contract. Emily studied the transaction records, her mind racing. They're not just using the ranch for distribution. They're setting up a complete shadow operation. Legitimate transport papers, real veterinary records, perfect cover for moving product through official channels. She pulled up the garage footage again, watching Kane threaten her sister. But Sarah's refusal to cooperate is putting their whole system at risk. The ranch's afternoon brought more suspicious cases. Sarah treated a horse whose injuries suggested specialized training for drug transport, but she couldn't document her real findings without risking exposure. Please, the horse's handler whispered when they were alone. Just write what they tell you to write. You don't know what they're capable of. James intercepted Sarah before she could file her report. Board's implementing immediate changes. All injury cases need administrative review before documentation. He slipped Sarah a small piece of paper. Be careful what you put in writing. They're watching everything. Sarah waited until her break to read the note. Transport records showing systematic fraud. External drive in my office. Don't trust ranch systems. The shift ended with mounting tension. Sarah noticed more of Kane's men positioned around the property, their earpieces and watchful eyes marking them as enforcers rather than typical bikers. In her office, Emily prepared for field deployment. Kane's making a mistake, she told Agent Torres. By threatening Sarah, he's exposed vulnerabilities in their operation we can use. It's too risky, Torres argued. If the Iron Serpents realize who you really are. They threatened my sister. Emily checked her secure phone, adding it to her deployment kit. That makes it personal. Besides, this provides perfect cover for getting inside their ranch operation. Sarah finished her shift documentation, hyper-aware of being watched as she gathered her things to leave. She noticed her uncle's office door slightly ajar. The external drive would have the evidence she needed, but getting to it meant risking exposure. A new group of injured horses provided the perfect distraction. During the chaos of emergency treatment, Sarah slipped into James's office. The drive was hidden exactly where suggested, tucked inside an old veterinary manual. But as Sarah secured the drive in her pocket, a shadow fell across the doorway. She turned to find one of Kane's men watching her with cold calculation. Working late, Miss Mitchell? His hand rested casually near his concealed weapon. Mr. Kane was just asking about you. In her Denver office, Emily's secure phone lit up with an alert from the ranch's security system. The camera showed her sister cornered in an office with one of Kane's known enforcers. Without hesitation, she grabbed her go-bag and headed for the door. The time for surveillance was over. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she faced Kane's enforcer in her uncle's office. The external drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her pocket. The man's cold smile never reached his eyes as he took another step into the room. Just catching up on paperwork about the new arrivals. Sarah kept her voice steady, channeling the same calm she used during difficult veterinary procedures. The latest group brought in multiple horses with injuries. Funny place to do paperwork. His accent carried traces of Eastern European military training. Mr. Kane prefers staff use their assigned workstations, better for proper documentation. The ranch's emergency alert system suddenly blared through the speakers, announcing multiple injured horses arriving from a nearby property. The enforcer's training kicked in as he assessed the situation, his attention momentarily divided. Multiple trauma cases, 5 minutes out, James's voice carried down the corridor. All available staff to the main barn. Sarah used the chaos to her advantage, sliding past the enforcer with professional urgency. Sorry, duty calls. Can't ignore an emergency alert. The main barn erupted into controlled chaos as horse trailers arrived. Through the organized frenzy, Sarah noticed Sheriff Watson having an intense discussion with Kane's enforcer. The administrator's face had lost all color. Meanwhile, Emily Mitchell's plane touched down at Bozeman Yellowstone International Airport. Her federal credentials had expedited the flight, but every minute felt crucial. Her secure phone displayed a building schematic of the Mitchell Ranch, highlighting newly installed surveillance systems. Target's enforcer made contact with the sister, Agent Torres updated through her encrypted earpiece. Ranch security shows he's now stationed outside the main barn. Back in the treatment area, Sarah worked methodically to assess injured horses. The injuries told a story different from the official report. Precision training damage rather than random trail accidents. These injury patterns are military grade, James murmured as they worked. Same as last month's training accident victims. Sarah caught Watson watching them through the barn windows, phone pressed to her ear. The sheriff's hands shook as she wrote something in her notebook. During a brief break, Sarah found a secure moment to examine the drive's contents on her personal laptop. The files revealed a sophisticated network of fraud, horse transport manipulation, insurance billing schemes, systematic modification of veterinary records. But something else caught her attention. Large payments to offshore accounts linked to county board members. James appeared silently beside her. They're using legitimate ranch operations as cover for something bigger. Dr. Cooper, Watson's voice cut through the air. The board requires your immediate presence at the county office. Mr. Kane's security team has some concerns about department protocols. Sarah watched her uncle follow Watson toward the parking lot, the sheriff's grip tight on James's arm. Through the barn windows, she noticed more of Kane's men taking up strategic positions. Across town, Emily established her operation in a secure farmhouse. Multiple monitors displayed ranch security feeds, staff movements, and surveillance on key syndicate members. Watson's leading Cooper to the boardroom, her analyst reported. Kane just arrived through the private entrance with 2 new enforcers. Emily studied the security footage. They're escalating containment. The ranch is their primary distribution hub. They can't risk exposure. She noted how the enforcers positioned themselves with tactical precision. These aren't ordinary criminals. They're running a professional operation. The ranch's afternoon shift brought more suspicious cases. Sarah treated 3 horses with identical injury patterns. Injuries that, according to ranch records, were never officially documented. The numbers don't match, she documented carefully in her hidden notes. Official inventory shows horses being transferred out, but the street supply is increasing. A young stable hand, eyes darting nervously, caught Sarah's attention between cases. Be careful accessing the transport logs, he whispered. They installed something in the system. It tracks everyone who views certain records. Before Sarah could respond, one of Kane's men appeared. The stable hand quickly busied himself with routine tasks, fear evident in his rigid posture. Hours passed without James returning. Sarah noticed Watson making multiple trips to the main office, each time looking more distressed. Through careful observation, she began mapping the pattern of Kane's surveillance. Shift changes, patrol routes, communication methods. The external drive had revealed more than just fraud. Hidden in mundane spreadsheets was evidence of a larger operation, coordinated admissions, systematic drug trafficking, and complex money laundering through ranch operations. Emily's surveillance picked up increased chatter among syndicate members. They're planning something, she told her team. Kane's enforcer made 3 calls to their cleanup specialist. Sarah's shift was ending when James finally returned. Her uncle's usual confidence had been replaced by careful control, a small bruise visible beneath his collar. Whatever you found, James whispered while checking a horse's leg. They know someone accessed restricted files. Be ready to move quickly. Mr. Cooper, your presence is requested. Watson had appeared again, 2 of Kane's men flanking her. The board has additional questions about department protocols. Sarah watched them lead James away again, noticing how the enforcers gripped his arms just out of public view. As she gathered her things to leave, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't take your usual route home, you're being watched. E." The message stopped her cold. She hadn't told anyone about Emily's international aid work. How did someone know to sign with her sister's initial? Through the barn windows, she spotted the enforcer from earlier speaking urgently into his phone, his attention fixed on her position. In her surveillance post, Emily watched her sister read the message. "Target acquired," she reported quietly, beginning extraction protocol. Sarah walked toward the parking lot, heart pounding as she noticed shadows moving in her peripheral vision. The drive felt hot in her pocket, evidence now a deadly weight as she reached for her car door. A hand touched her shoulder. "Miss Mitchell." The enforcer's voice carried lethal promise. "Mr. Kane would like to discuss your recent after-hours activities." The enforcer's grip tightened on Sarah's shoulder as two more of Kane's men emerged from the shadows of the parking lot. Their practiced movements spoke of military training as they established a perimeter around her Jeep. "The drive, please." The lead enforcer held out his hand, his accent thicker with irritation. "Let's not make this more unpleasant than necessary." Sarah's veterinary training kept her voice steady. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to go home after my shift." "Your dedication to playing innocent is admirable." Marcus Kane's smooth voice carried across the lot as he approached, flanked by more security. "But we both know what you took from James Cooper's office. The only question is whether you've had time to look at its contents." The sound of approaching vehicles drew everyone's attention. Two unmarked vans had entered the lot, cutting off potential escape routes. Sarah's heart sank as more men in tactical gear emerged. "Last chance for professional courtesy," Kane stated calmly. "The drive, please. Then we can discuss your future at the ranch in a civilized manner." The parking lot's lights suddenly went dark, plunging the scene into chaos. Emergency generators cast strange shadows as a figure moved with practiced efficiency through the darkness. Sarah heard the impact of multiple takedowns, the sounds precise and controlled. "Get her out of here," Kane shouted, his professional demeanor cracking. "And find out who—" A smoke canister detonated, filling the space with thick cover. Sarah felt a hand grasp her arm, different from the enforcer's brutal grip. This touch was familiar somehow. "Move with me," a voice whispered. Emily's voice, but harder than Sarah remembered. "Stay close and do exactly what I say." Questions flooded Sarah's mind as her sister led her through the chaos with military precision. Emily's movements were nothing like the aid worker she'd claimed to be, each step and counteraction speaking of years of tactical training. They emerged into a service road, Emily quickly checking sightlines before rushing them toward an emergency exit. Behind them, Kane's men were regrouping, their shouts echoing through the night. "The access road," Emily directed, her voice clipped and professional. "We have 90 seconds before they seal the perimeter." Sarah followed her sister's lead, mind reeling as they moved through the ranch's maintenance areas. "Emily, what's going on? How did you—" "Not now." Emily checked her phone as they moved. "Kane's people are activating ranch lockdown. We need to clear the property before—" "Uncle James," Sarah interrupted. "They still have him at the county office. We can't just—" "Agent Torres's team is moving to secure him." Emily's casual reference to federal agents made Sarah's head spin. "But we need to get that drive to a secure location. Its contents are more important than you realize." They emerged into a back alley where a nondescript sedan waited, engine running. Emily quickly checked the vehicle before ushering Sarah inside. 7 years, Sarah managed as they pulled away from the ranch. 7 years of stories about remote villages and poor internet connections. "I couldn't tell you." Emily's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings as she drove. "My assignment was to track the Iron Serpents expansion into legitimate businesses. They're using ranches across 3 states to facilitate a massive criminal enterprise." Sarah thought about all the suspicious cases, the documentation irregularities, the pressure from law enforcement, the transport discrepancies, the altered records. "It's bigger than that." Emily took a complex series of turns ensuring they weren't followed. "They're not just running drugs through the ranches. They're building a complete shadow transportation system. Legitimate facilities, real veterinary records, perfect cover for moving product and laundering money on a massive scale. In the county office boardroom, Kane slammed his fist on the expensive table. How did we miss this? 7 years of operation and we had a federal agent this close to our infrastructure. Sheriff Watson trembled as she reviewed security footage. The parking lot cameras were temporarily disabled, some kind of professional countermeasure. Find them, Kane cut her off. Both sisters, and find out exactly what was on that drive. He turned to where James sat, guarded by 2 enforcers. Perhaps the good rancher can help us understand what his niece has stumbled into. Emily drove them to a secure location in Livingston, carefully chosen for multiple escape routes. As they entered, Sarah saw the wall of monitors displaying ranch surveillance, financial records, and detailed maps of syndicate operations. I've been building this case for years, Emily explained, connecting the drive to a secure system. The evidence links Kane's organization to criminal enterprises across the entire Northwest. But the Mitchell Ranch is different. It's their primary hub where they perfect their methods before expanding to other facilities. Sarah watched as her sister decoded layers of financial data. The scope of the operation was staggering. Sophisticated drug distribution networks hidden behind legitimate ranching services, complex money laundering through livestock sales, systematic corruption of local officials. Why didn't you tell me? Sarah's voice carried years of accumulated distance. Emily paused her work, finally meeting her sister's eyes. Because Kane's people watch everyone connected to their operations. The only way to keep you safe was to stay away. She gestured to the monitors. But when they started pressuring you directly, everything changed. They're going to hurt Uncle James, Sarah insisted. He's the one who left me the drive. He knew they were watching him, but he still... Agent Torres, Emily spoke into her secure phone. Status update on the secondary target. The response made both sisters tense. Cooper is gone. Kane's people moved him before we could extract. They're using county systems to cover their tracks. Logged him for an emergency meeting that doesn't exist. Emily studied the ranch security feeds. They're adapting, changing tactics. This isn't their usual cleanup protocol. She turned to Sarah. What exactly did you see on that drive? Financial records, altered transport files, evidence of fraud? Sarah stopped as a particular document caught her eye on the monitors. Wait, go back to that county board memo from last month. The sisters leaned in together, their shared focus bridging 7 years of separation. The document revealed something that made even Emily's trained composure slip. Evidence that the Mitchell Ranch was just the beginning. The Iron Serpents were preparing to expand their operation into major ranches across the entire western United States. They're not just running a criminal enterprise, Emily realized. They're building an empire. The secure location in Livingston hummed with activity as Emily's team worked to trace James Cooper's disappearance. Sarah watched her sister coordinate with federal agents, still processing how different Emily was from the aid worker she'd pretended to be. Every movement, every command spoke of years of professional training. County security footage shows them moving him through a service entrance, Agent Torres reported, bringing up multiple camera angles. They used a back road to bypass normal exit routes. They're getting sloppy, Emily noted, studying the footage. Kane's people usually maintain better operational security. This is rushed, aggressive, not their standard protocol. Sarah recognized something in the transport records displayed on the adjacent screen. Wait, pull up Uncle James's last veterinary case documentation. Her years of ranch experience spotted the pattern. He wasn't just keeping records of their fraud, he was coding information into legitimate animal files, details about their operation hidden in medical terminology. At the county office, Marcus Kane paced the boardroom, his usual smooth control cracking under pressure. 7 years of careful infiltration, and now we have federal agents crawling through our infrastructure. He turned to Sheriff Watson, who flinched under his gaze. How many other staff members have been documenting suspicious cases? We are reviewing all department records, Watson stammered, her hands shaking as she worked her tablet. But James Cooper had administrative access across multiple systems. He could have hidden information anywhere. Find it, Kane's voice carried lethal promise. And make sure our other facilities understand the consequences of insufficient loyalty. In a dimly lit room across town, James Cooper tested his restraints, analyzing his situation with professional detachment. His captors had tactical knowledge. They'd secured him carefully without risking serious injury. He listened to their movements, gathering information about shift changes and security patterns. Back in Livingston, Sarah helped Emily's team decode James's hidden messages. He marked certain cases with specific combinations of injuries, looking at transport dates and medication orders. He was tracking their distribution schedule. Smart, Emily admitted, expanding the pattern across multiple records. He used their own system against them. Any investigation would only find legitimate veterinary documentation. Agent Torres interrupted with urgent news. Kane's enforcer just accessed the county's personnel database. They're pulling files on every staff member who worked closely with Cooper. He's preparing for a purge, Emily realized. Standard procedure when an operation's compromised. Eliminate potential security breaches. Sarah's phone lit up with messages from ranch staff. They're calling in all off-duty personnel for emergency protocols review. Sheriff Watson's requesting immediate department meetings. It's a containment operation, Emily explained, already moving to secure communications. Get everyone in one place, identify threats, handle problems quietly. She turned to her team. We need eyes inside those meetings. I'm going back in, Sarah stated firmly. Absolutely not, Emily countered. Kane's people will be watching for you. Which is exactly why it needs to be me. Sarah's voice carried the same determination she brought to difficult veterinary cases. The staff trusts me. If we're going to protect them and find Uncle James, we need someone on the inside who knows what to look for. Emily studied her sister, seeing not just the dedicated veterinarian, but a potential asset. You'll need tactical training first. Quick course in counter-surveillance, secure communication protocols, emergency extraction procedures. Teach me, Sarah insisted. Uncle James risked everything to expose their operation. We owe him this. Agent Torres's phone interrupted with priority alerts. Multiple police units just got called to the Mitchell Ranch. Report of suspicious activity in the stables. Not a coincidence, Emily noted grimly. They're creating chaos to cover their moves. She pulled up ranch security feeds, analyzing patrol patterns. Kane's people are using the emergency protocols to isolate potential threats. In the ranch's main office, 2 of Kane's men systematically accessed transport records while staff was distracted by the security alert. Their efficiency spoke of intimate knowledge of ranch operations. Sarah recognized their strategy. They're not just covering their tracks, they're going to pin everything on Uncle James. Make it look like he was running his own operation without their knowledge. Palmer provided additional intelligence. Their next board meeting is in 3 days. They'll want Cooper present to approve the expansion plans. After that, he becomes a liability, Torres finished. Once the contracts are signed, they won't need him anymore. Emily studied the surveillance feeds, noting guard patrol patterns. 3 days, that's our window. Any longer and Kane might decide to cut his losses, eliminate complications. Sarah reviewed emergency protocols from similar facilities. We'll need specific equipment to make it look legitimate. Everything has to match their standard operating procedures exactly. I can get what you need, Agent Torres offered. I still have access to law enforcement requisitions. Everything will look routine in their system. Agent Torres received another update. DEA just opened an investigation into unusual livestock patterns at 3 of their ranches. Kane's corporate shield is cracking. He'll be desperate, Sarah warned. Men like him are most dangerous when they feel trapped. Emily finalized the tactical assignments. We move in 48 hours. That gives us time to establish the necessary documentation trail, position our resources. And if something goes wrong? Sarah asked quietly. Then we make sure the evidence reaches every major news organization, Emily replied. Everything on that drive becomes public, their entire operation exposed. Sarah thought about James, alone in their custody. We're not leaving him behind. No, Emily agreed, remembering how their separation had started with her assignment to infiltrate the syndicate. We're not leaving anyone behind. Not anymore. The sisters shared a look of absolute determination. 7 years of distance dissolved in their shared purpose. Kane's organization had made a fatal mistake. They'd threatened the wrong family. "Time to show them," Sarah said quietly. "What happens when you come after one of our own?" Dawn broke over Paradise Valley as Sarah approached the Mitchell Ranch in her work clothes, carrying legitimate veterinary documents prepared by Agent Torres. Her staff ID badge had been perfectly replicated, showing her as a relief veterinarian assigned to their network. Through her earpiece, Emily coordinated the operation from a mobile command center. "Security checkpoint ahead," Emily warned. 2 guards, standard protocols. Remember your cover story." Sarah presented her credentials with practiced casualness, her demeanor matching countless shift changes she'd worked over the years. "Amanda Peters, Valley Relief Services. I'm on the temp roster for today's shift." The guard checked her paperwork against their system. Sarah noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the dark circles under his eyes. The facility staff was feeling the pressure of recent events. "Multiple injured horses reported," Watson's voice carried through the ranch's PA system. "All available medical personnel to emergency response stations." The distraction worked perfectly. Their carefully orchestrated incidents near the ranch had created legitimate veterinary emergencies requiring immediate response. Security protocols shifted as the property entered standard emergency procedures. "They're pulling guards from internal positions," Agent Torres reported from his surveillance position, "redirecting resources to handle the incoming cases." Sarah moved through the ranch's corridors, her veterinary training allowing her to blend seamlessly with the controlled chaos of emergency response. She noted camera positions, security checkpoints, potential escape routes, everything Emily had trained her to observe. "2 of Kane's men by the stable access," Emily warned. "They're not responding to the emergency protocols." "That confirms our theory," Sarah sub-vocalized while checking supply inventory. "They're keeping Uncle James in the secure storage area." A stable hand rushed past with urgent test results, nearly colliding with Sarah. The young man's eyes showed recognition. Another temp worker caught in the syndicate's operation. Sarah gave a slight nod, acknowledging their shared understanding. "Status change," Agent Torres reported. "Federal task force just raided one of their other facilities. Kane's en route to your location." Sarah maintained her professional routine while processing this complication. Through careful observation, she spotted more of Kane's private security arriving, their movement suggesting military training. "They're accelerating something," Torres noted. "This is more than just responding to the raids." Watson's administrative access revealed concerning details. "They're preparing for mass horse transfers, moving their entire operation to fallback facilities." Sarah used a legitimate medication check to approach the stable area. The secure storage section required additional clearance, but their staged emergency had created necessary chaos in the authorization systems. "Warning!" Emily's voice carried controlled urgency. "Facial recognition flagged you on their security feeds. Countdown to exposure, 3 minutes." Working quickly, Sarah accessed the transport logs. The environmental control records confirmed their suspicions. One section maintained specific conditions necessary for long-term human detention. "Multiple heat signatures detected," Torres reported using thermal imaging. "They're keeping more people than just Cooper in there." A security alert sounded through the ranch's systems. Sarah heard Watson trying to override it, but Kane's arrival had triggered additional protocols. "Attention all staff," Watson announced, her voice steady despite the pressure. "System-wide security update in progress. Please maintain normal operations." But Sarah noticed the guards changing patterns. They were systematically securing sections of the property, isolating potential threats. "Kane just ordered evacuation prep," Torres warned. "They're getting ready to move everyone to a secondary location." Through the storage area's observation windows, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the secure holding area. What she saw made her blood run cold, multiple people being prepped for transfer, all showing signs of forced sedation. "They're not just holding Uncle James," she reported quietly. "They've got other ranchers here, people who threatened to expose their operation." Emily's team quickly adapted to this revelation. "Change of plans. We need a larger extraction strategy." Torres, coordinate with federal response teams, create a wider perimeter. Sarah heard familiar voices approaching, Kane and his inner circle discussing urgent contingencies. The board meeting's been compromised, one man reported. FBI's questioning ranch owners across 3 states. Accelerate the timeline, Kane ordered. Move our special guests to the backup facility. Once they've served their purpose, make sure there are no loose ends. New problem, Torres interrupted. Local PD just got orders to shut down all traffic around the property. Someone in the department's still working for Kane. Sarah found herself trapped between approaching guards and Kane's team. The storage area offered temporary cover, but she needed a new strategy. Listen carefully, Emily instructed. Emergency protocols require them to move prisoners through specific routes, use their own procedures against them. Understanding dawned as Sarah studied the evacuation plans. Every facility in their network followed the same protocols, including detailed requirements for prisoner transfers. I've got an idea, she whispered, but it's going to require perfect timing. She grabbed a set of veterinary charts, making precise notations that would force specific responses in any ranching facility. Certain documentation triggered automatic protocols that even Kane's people couldn't ignore without breaking their cover. Whatever you're planning, Emily warned, make it fast. Kane's men are starting to identify staff members with suspicious credentials. Sarah finished her documentation just as the facility's systems registered her changes. Automatic alerts began triggering throughout the building, medical emergencies that required immediate response and specific movement protocols. Clever, Torres approved, recognizing the strategy. They can't maintain security positions without violating ranching regulations. One wrong move, and they lose their legitimate cover. But as Sarah prepared to implement the next phase, Kane's voice carried clearly through the corridor. Find the sister, he ordered. She's here somewhere trying to be clever, just like her uncle was before we arranged his unfortunate accident. The revelation hit Sarah hard. Her uncle's near-fatal training accident 7 years ago, the event that had started Emily's undercover mission, hadn't been an accident at all. Focus, Emily's voice carried calm strength. Use that anger. Channel it into the mission. We're going to make them pay for everything, but first we get our people out. All of our people, Sarah finished, her veterinary training helping maintain composure. Sarah's falsified veterinary alerts created precisely calculated chaos throughout the ranch. Emergency protocols forced Kane's security teams to adapt, breaking their carefully maintained positions. Through the storage area windows, she watched them struggling to maintain control while following required procedures. They're moving Uncle James first, Torres reported from his observation point. 3 more ranchers being prepped for transfer, all showing signs of long-term sedation. Emily's voice carried controlled fury after Kane's revelation about their uncle. Agent Torres found the original accident report. They used the same method on 3 other targets, equipment rigged to look like mechanical failure. Focus on the extraction, Sarah reminded her sister while documenting vital signs. We make them pay for everything after we get our people out. Watson's voice came through the ranch's communications. All staff prepare for emergency protocols. Multiple critical cases incoming from Valley Creek Ranch. The announcement was their agreed signal. Watson had successfully coordinated with loyal staff members throughout the facility. Ranch personnel began implementing mass casualty procedures, creating additional confusion in Kane's security network. Warning, Torres interrupted. Someone just accessed our secure channel using old authentication codes. We've got a leak. Sarah spotted one of Kane's men speaking urgently into a phone, his position giving him clear view of the secure storage access points. His movements suggested he was coordinating with someone who knew their plans. Michael Chen, Emily identified. Former DEA analyst who disappeared 6 months ago. He's been feeding them intelligence about our operations. The facility security systems suddenly shifted, automated doors sealing off specific sections. Sarah found herself trapped in the storage area, but the isolation worked to her advantage. She now had access to the environmental controls for the secure ward. They're rushing the transfers, Torres warned. Kane is getting spooked by the federal raids on his other facilities. Sarah watched through observation windows as security staff prepared the sedated captives for movement. James was barely conscious, but his eyes showed recognition when Sarah came into view. "New problem," Agent Torres reported. "County Sheriff just got orders to establish a perimeter. They're blocking our backup teams." Emily's response was immediate. "Implement Contingency 3. Use the evidence from Torres's drive to force police cooperation." Sarah accessed the secure ward's sedation systems, her medical training allowing her to understand the complex protocols they were using. They've got them on a specialized drug cocktail, carefully calibrated to maintain consciousness while preventing resistance. "Classic intelligence technique," Emily noted grimly. "Keep them aware enough to provide necessary information without allowing them to fight back." Through the storage area security feed, Sarah spotted Kane entering the facility's command center. His usual smooth control had been replaced by cold calculation as he coordinated with his teams. "Acceleration protocols in effect," he ordered. "Move primary assets to Site Beta. Clean up secondary complications." They're not just evacuating, Torres realized. This is a purge. They're eliminating everyone who knows too much about their operation. Sarah worked quickly, using her veterinary knowledge to adjust the secure ward's monitoring systems. Years of emergency experience had taught her how to manipulate medical equipment without triggering alerts. "Whatever you're planning," Emily warned, "make it fast. Kane's people are sweeping the facility section by section." "Almost there," Sarah replied while finalizing the adjustments. "Emergency protocols require specific responses to patient distress. They'll have to follow proper medical procedures or risk exposing their whole operation." Watson's voice came through again. "Code Blue in Secure Ward. All available medical personnel respond immediately." The effect was instantaneous. Kane's security teams had to adapt as medical staff rushed to follow emergency protocols. The carefully maintained isolation of their prisoners became impossible to sustain. "Clever girl," Kane's voice carried clearly through the command center's communications. "Using our own systems against us. You really are your uncle's niece." Sarah felt Emily tense through their connection. "He's baiting us," the older sister warned, trying to force a mistake. "No," Sarah corrected while implementing the next phase of her plan. "He's revealing his own weakness. 7 years ago he was sloppy, left evidence of Uncle James's accident. Now he's getting sloppy again." Through careful observation, she spotted what everyone else had missed. Kane's operation required absolute control, perfect coordination. The moment that control started slipping, his people began making mistakes. "Multiple breach points detected," Torres reported. "They're losing containment of the facility secure sections." Watson coordinated with their allied staff members, creating additional chaos through legitimate veterinary procedures. Every emergency protocol they activated forced Kane's people to choose between maintaining security and preserving their cover. "You should have stayed at the ranch," Kane announced through the facility's communications, "playing veterinarian, following orders, just like your uncle should have stayed a simple rancher instead of investigating certain financial irregularities." The secure ward's monitoring systems showed James regaining consciousness as Sarah's adjustments took effect. The other captive ranchers were also showing signs of awareness. "He's getting desperate," Emily observed, "making it personal instead of maintaining operational security. Classic sign of losing control." Sarah spotted Michael Chen coordinating with Kane's security teams, his intelligence training evident in his movements. "He's implementing countermeasures," Sarah reported, "trying to lock down our access to facility systems." "Let him," Emily replied with grim satisfaction. "While he's focused on that, he's not watching our real play." Through the storage area windows, Sarah watched their plan taking effect. The combination of legitimate medical emergencies and carefully orchestrated chaos had created exactly the conditions they needed. "This is your last chance," Kane announced. "Surrender now and perhaps we discuss things professionally. Continue refusing our generosity, and you force more permanent solutions." But Sarah had already spotted what he'd missed. In his growing desperation to maintain control, Kane had pulled too many security teams from crucial positions. The facility's carefully maintained facade as a legitimate ranch operation was cracking. "Ready for the next phase?" Emily asked, her tactical teams in position. Sarah checked the secure ward systems one final time. James and the other captives were awake enough to understand what was coming. Ready. Time to show them what happens when they threaten the wrong family. Through the facility's security feeds, she watched Kane receiving urgent updates about federal raids on his other operations. His perfectly constructed criminal empire was beginning to crumble, and he didn't even realize that the worst was yet to come. "Dad would be proud," Emily said quietly. "Now let's finish what he started." The secure ward's monitoring systems showed all 4 captive ranchers regaining consciousness as Sarah's carefully calibrated adjustments took effect. Through the observation windows, she watched James fighting through the sedation, his years of military experience helping him understand what was happening. "Multiple security teams converging on your position," Emily warned. "Chen's figured out what you did with their sedation protocols." Sarah moved quickly through the storage area, using her knowledge of ranch layouts to stay ahead of Kane's people. The facility's emergency systems continued broadcasting Watson's coordinated alerts, forcing security to fragment their response. 3 minutes until full consciousness, Sarah reported, checking vital signs. "They'll be able to move under their own power, but we need to maintain the chaos until then." Torres's voice carried urgent warning. "Chen's accessing the environmental controls. He's trying to reset the secure ward systems." "Let her," Sarah replied, already implementing the next phase. "She's about to give us exactly what we need." The facility's automated doors suddenly activated, security protocols engaging throughout the building. But Sarah had anticipated this. In any medical facility, emergency overrides existed to prevent patient isolation during critical situations. "Kane's evacuating the command center," Emily reported, moving to his fallback position, but he left Chen to handle the containment. Through carefully positioned security cameras, Sarah spotted the former DEA analyst coordinating Kane's remaining forces. Michael Chen's movements showed his intelligence training, but also revealed something crucial. He was focused entirely on digital systems, missing the human element of ranch operations. "All security teams consolidate on Sub-Level 2, Chen ordered through facility communications. "Lock down all medical personnel. No unauthorized movement between sectors." Watson's voice countered immediately. "Attention all staff. Critical patient deterioration in secure ward. Emergency response protocols in effect." The resulting confusion was exactly what they needed. Kane's security teams hesitated, caught between Chen's orders and the facility's required medical procedures. That hesitation created gaps in their coverage. "Now," Emily commanded, "all teams execute." The operation unfolded with precise coordination. Emergency response teams, actually Emily's tactical units, breached the facility's outer perimeter. Legitimate medical staff coordinated by Watson implemented mass casualty protocols that forced security to adapt. Sarah reached the secure ward access point just as James managed to stand. The other captive ranchers were also mobile, their years of outdoor experience helping them work through the sedation's effects. "Multiple hostiles approaching from East Corridor," Torres warned. "Chen's leading them personally." "Perfect," Sarah replied, remembering her sister's tactical training. "She's leaving the command center exposed. Watson, now!" The facility security systems suddenly displayed critical failures across all sectors. Watson's administrative access combined with Torres's inside knowledge had created systematic vulnerabilities in their carefully maintained control. "You're trapped," Chen's voice carried from the corridor. "Kane's already moved to secure facilities. You've lost your chance to stop the expansion." "Have we?" Sarah challenged while helping James toward the emergency exit. "Check your monitoring systems. See what's happening at your other locations." Chen's momentary distraction as she verified facility status was all they needed. Emily's teams breached multiple entry points simultaneously, using the confusion to secure crucial sections of the building. "Sarah." James's voice was weak but determined. "The evidence. Kane's office. Your father. Save your strength," Sarah advised professionally while checking vital signs. "Emily's team is handling that part." Through their secure channel, she heard her sister confirming, "Files recovered from his private server, everything. Dad's original investigation, everything he uncovered about their ranch takeovers. Kane kept it as insurance." Chen's voice carried growing frustration as she realized how completely they'd been outmaneuvered. You have no idea what you're interrupting. This goes beyond Kane, beyond simple criminal enterprise. We're restructuring the entire agriculture system. Through fraud, kidnapping, and murder? Sarah challenged while securing her patience for movement. That's what my father discovered, isn't it? Not just criminal corruption, but systematic manipulation of agricultural infrastructure. He was naive, Chen snapped, just like you're being naive. Someone will always control these systems. At least we're making them efficient. Emily's tactical teams moved through the facility with practiced precision, securing sections as Sarah coordinated the medical evacuation. Years of veterinary experience combined perfectly with her sister's strategic training. Multiple vehicles approaching, Torres warned. Kane sending reinforcements. Too late, Emily responded with cold satisfaction. Federal teams just raided their backup facility. Kane walked right into the trap. Sarah spotted Chen realizing the full scope of their operation, how they'd used the facility's own protocols and procedures to systematically dismantle its security. The former analyst's DEA training couldn't compensate for their perfect combination of medical and tactical expertise. You think this ends with us? Chen demanded, her composure cracking. There are 12 more facilities being prepared. The entire Western agricultural infrastructure is being reorganized. Check your secure channels, Sarah advised while monitoring her patient status. See how many of those facilities are currently being raided by federal agencies. The look of dawning comprehension on Chen's face confirmed their success. While she'd been focused on containing the situation here, Emily's larger operation had systematically targeted every facility in their network. Sarah, James grabbed her arm, fighting through the last effects of sedation. Your father, brother, he left evidence hidden in the transport systems. Patterns that proved, we know, Sarah assured her uncle. Emily found it all, everything Dad discovered about their operation. All the proof needed to expose their entire network. Through facility security feeds, they watched Kane's carefully constructed criminal empire crumbling. Every system they'd infiltrated, every procedure they'd corrupted was being systematically exposed and dismantled. It's over, Michael, Sarah stated firmly. The only question is whether you face charges for helping them or make a deal by providing evidence. Chen's response was cut short as federal tactical teams breached her position. The former analyst's training showed in her quick assessment of options and the recognition that she had none. Get our people out, Emily ordered through their secure channel. I'll handle the rest. As Sarah coordinated the medical evacuation, she heard her sister confronting Kane's people with their father's recovered evidence. The systematic dismantling of their operation was complete. The secure ranch facility had transformed into a federal crime scene as agents processed evidence and medical teams attended to the rescued ranchers. Sarah monitored James's vital signs, while tactical units secured the building's perimeter. Through her earpiece, she heard Emily coordinating with multiple agencies. Chen's talking, Emily reported, trading information for consideration. The scope of their operation is bigger than we thought. Agent Torres arrived with urgent updates. Kane has been tracked to a private airfield outside Bozeman, but something's wrong. He's not following standard escape protocols. Sarah recognized the pattern from her veterinary experience. He's not running. This is like when animals present with misleading symptoms. He's creating a distraction. James struggled to sit up, fighting through the last effects of sedation. The board meeting, he managed. It wasn't just about expansion approval. They're implementing something called Protocol Artemis. Watson accessed the facility's secure servers, her administrative privileges revealing hidden databases. Found it. Artemis isn't just a protocol. It's a complete restructuring of regional agricultural infrastructure. They're positioning to take control of livestock transport across multiple states. That's what Dad discovered, Sarah realized, checking her patient's monitoring equipment. Not just criminal corruption, but systematic manipulation of agriculture systems. Torres's voice carried urgent warning. Multiple security teams mobilizing across the valley. They're not Kane's usual personnel. These are military-grade contractors, Through facility security feeds, they watched federal agents processing Michael Chen's command center. The former analyst had revealed crucial details about their operation, but her expression suggested she was holding something back. "Sarah," James grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "The transport records. Your father found a pattern. Every facility they targeted showed the same anomalies." Emily's team quickly analyzed the data. They weren't just using ranches for drug distribution. They were creating a shadow agriculture network, using legitimate infrastructure to hide criminal operations and provide deniability. Watson added, studying administrative files. Every procedure looked legitimate on paper. Perfect cover for moving products, laundering money, and eliminating threats. Sarah noticed something in the supply manifests. These equipment orders, they're not just for this facility. They're preparing to replicate this setup across multiple locations. Kane is not trying to escape, Emily concluded. He's initiating their contingency plan. If they can't maintain control quietly, they'll take over by force. Agent Torres received urgent updates. Multiple ranches reporting armed security teams attempting to implement emergency protocols. They're using the confusion to seize control of critical infrastructure. That's why they needed ranchers, Sarah understood while treating her patients. Not just for credibility, but to maintain operational efficiency during the takeover. James confirmed her theory. They approached me 6 months ago, wanted my endorsement for their expansion plans. When I started asking questions about their documentation, they eliminated potential resistance, Emily finished, just like they did with Dad when he uncovered their strategy. Watson's access revealed more details. Every facility in their network is activating emergency protocols. They're using legitimate procedures as cover for establishing control. Not just ranch procedures, Torres reported. Police departments, emergency services, regulatory agencies. They've compromised entire response networks. Sarah studied the patterns with her veterinary experience. They're creating artificial crises to justify their takeover. Standard protocol requires specific responses to mass casualties, which gives them excuse to implement security measures. Emily analyzed. Once they control agricultural response infrastructure, they control everything. Through their secure channel, they heard federal teams encountering heavy resistance at multiple locations. Kane's organization had embedded themselves deeply into legitimate systems. "We need to stop the activation," Sarah insisted while stabilizing another rescued rancher. Once they establish control of agricultural services, they become too critical to remove. Emily agreed. Standard intelligence tactic. Make yourself essential to basic infrastructure. James struggled to share more information. The board meeting. They're not just approving expansion. They're implementing regional emergency protocols, creating artificial crises to justify total takeover. Watson finished accessing more files. They've positioned personnel throughout the system. One signal, and they seize control of response networks. Torres spotted crucial movement through security feeds. Kane is accessing a secure facility near the original ranch. Looks like some kind of command center. Sarah recognized the location. That's the Emergency Response Coordination Hub. They handle disaster management for the entire region. Perfect position to control critical infrastructure, Emily noted. Create enough chaos. No one questions emergency security measures. Agent Torres's team uncovered more evidence. They've got sleeper units embedded in multiple services. Police, fire, medical response. All compromised. Not just criminal enterprise anymore, Sarah observed, while checking patient stability. This is about controlling entire systems of emergency response. Through facility monitors, they watched Kane's plan unfolding. Every ranch in their network was reporting security incidents, creating legitimate cause for emergency protocols. We have to stop the activation, Emily decided. Cut off their control before they can establish emergency authority. How? Watson asked. They're already implementing protocols at multiple locations. Sarah thought about emergency procedures, about how systems responded to crisis. We use their own protocols against them. Create legitimate medical emergencies that force specific responses, breaking their control by enforcing actual procedures. Emily understood. They can't maintain their takeover while following real emergency protocols. James managed a weak smile. Just like documenting everything in transport records, sometimes the best weapon against corruption is proper procedure. Through their secure channel, they heard Kane coordinating his forces. His usual smooth control had been replaced by cold determination as he prepared to implement his final strategy. "Time to end this," Emily announced. "Ready to finish what Dad started." Sarah checked her patients one final time, ensuring their stability. "Ready. Let's show them what happens when they try to corrupt agricultural services." The sisters shared a look of absolute resolution. 7 years of separation had prepared them perfectly for this moment, combining veterinary expertise and tactical training to protect the systems meant to feed the nation. The Emergency Response Coordination Hub buzzed with controlled chaos as Kane's teams implemented Protocol Artemis. Through surveillance feeds, Sarah and Emily watched their father's murderer directing the systematic takeover of regional agricultural infrastructure. Security teams are activating at 17 ranches, Agent Torres reported. They're using legitimate emergency protocols to establish control of critical departments. Sarah studied the facility's layout, her veterinary experience identifying crucial weaknesses. They have to maintain specific response procedures. Agricultural regulations require documented protocols for mass casualty incidents, which means they can't completely abandon legitimate operations. Not without exposing their true purpose, Emily concluded. They need actual ranchers to approve emergency measures, create official documentation. James, now recovered enough to assist from their secure location, provided vital context. The board meeting wasn't just for show. They needed ranch administrators to approve emergency measures, create paper trails. Watson accessed administrative systems across multiple facilities. They're generating artificial crises, creating paper trails to justify security interventions. Just like they did with Dad's investigation, Sarah noted while reviewing emergency protocols. Hide criminal activity behind legitimate procedures. Torres spotted crucial movement through security feeds. Kane's implementing something called Phase 3, multiple teams moving into facilities across the valley. Emily's tactical experience recognized the pattern. Standard intelligence strategy. Create enough chaos that people accept any measure promising to restore order. Through their secured channel, they heard federal teams encountering heavy resistance. Kane's organization had positioned their people throughout emergency response networks. "We need to disrupt their command structure," Sarah insisted. "Once they establish control of agricultural services, they become too critical to remove." James pointed out something in the facility documentation. The coordination hub requires specific veterinary oversight. They can't implement emergency protocols without proper authorization, which is why they needed to control ranch administrators. Watson understood, accessing more systems. Every emergency response has to follow established procedures. Sarah's veterinary experience suggested a strategy. We use their own protocols against them, force them to follow actual medical procedures during their takeover attempt, breaking their control by enforcing real emergency responses. Emily agreed. They can't maintain their operation while following legitimate protocols. Torres provided crucial intelligence. Kane's command center is running everything through central dispatch, one system controlling all emergency responses. Perfect, Sarah realized. Agricultural services require specific documentation. Every response has to be logged, every procedure recorded. Through facility monitors, they watched Kane coordinating his forces. His usual corporate facade had been replaced by cold efficiency as he directed the systematic takeover. Multiple ranches reporting security breaches, Torres updated. They're using emergency protocols to lock down critical departments. But they have to maintain services, Sarah pointed out. Can't completely shut down emergency response without drawing attention. Watson's administrative access revealed more details. They're manipulating dispatch protocols, controlling which emergencies get priority response. Just like they did with ranch resources, Emily noted. Direct emergency services away from their operations, ensure response delays for potential threats. James managed to access more files. The board meeting documentation shows their whole strategy. Use emergency protocols to establish control, then maintain it through security consulting contracts. Sarah studied emergency response procedures. Every facility has required protocols for mass casualty incidents. They can't ignore legitimate medical emergencies without exposing themselves. Which gives us our way in, Emily concluded. We use actual emergency response requirements to break their control. Through their secure channel, they heard Kane issuing new orders. His voice carried cold satisfaction as his plans unfolded. All security teams implement final protocols, he commanded. Establish control of emergency departments. Any resistance is to be handled with extreme prejudice. Watson's access showed the impact. They're locking down agricultural systems across the region, taking control of emergency response networks. Not just taking control, Sarah observed while reviewing protocols. They're creating a complete shadow infrastructure using legitimate emergency services to hide their operation. Torres spotted crucial movement. Kane's implementing some kind of failsafe, special teams moving into position at key facilities. Insurance, Emily analyzed. If they can't maintain quiet control, they'll take over by force. James provided vital context. That's what your father discovered. Not just criminal enterprise, but systematic corruption of emergency services. Sarah's veterinary training suggested their counter-strategy. We trigger actual emergency protocols, force them to follow legitimate medical procedures, breaking their control by enforcing proper response requirements. Emily understood. They can't maintain their takeover while handling real emergencies. Through facility monitors, they watched their plan taking shape. Ranch staff across multiple locations began implementing actual emergency procedures, forcing Kane's teams to adapt. It's working, Watson reported. Their control structure is fragmenting. They can't maintain their takeover while following required protocols. But Kane's voice carried dangerous satisfaction as he issued new orders. Initiate contingency measures. If we can't control emergency services quietly, we'll take them by force. Multiple armed teams entering facilities, Torres warned. They're abandoning subtle approach, moving to direct takeover. Sarah exchanged looks with her sister. Everything they'd uncovered, everything their father had died exposing had led to this moment. Ready? Emily asked, her tactical teams in position. Sarah checked emergency protocols one final time. Ready. Time to show them what happens when they try to corrupt agricultural services. Through facility feeds, they watched Kane directing his forces. He had no idea that his carefully constructed takeover was about to face the combined force of veterinary expertise and tactical training. The Mitchell sisters' final strike against the organization that had murdered their father. The Emergency Response Coordination Hub's main floor erupted with activity as Sarah and Emily's plan took effect. Multiple ranches began reporting genuine veterinary emergencies, forcing Kane's teams to respond according to established protocols. Mass casualty incidents reported at 3 locations, Watson announced through emergency channels. All available units respond according to standard procedures. Sarah watched through security feeds as Kane's carefully constructed control began to fragment. His forces couldn't maintain their takeover while following required emergency response protocols. They're splitting resources, Torres reported. Can't ignore legitimate emergencies without exposing their operation. Emily's tactical teams moved into position around the facility. Federal units are responding to actual emergencies. Kane's people have to either maintain their cover or abandon protocol. Through the command center's windows, they watched Kane realizing the trap. His usual composed demeanor cracked as he saw his forces being systematically divided by veterinary necessity. Your father tried similar tactics, he announced through facility communications. Thought he could use regulations and procedures to stop progress. Look where that got him. Show us, Sarah challenged while coordinating emergency responses. Show us exactly what happened to him. You kept the evidence, didn't you? Insurance against your own organization. James, coordinating from their secure location, accessed more facility records. Multiple emergency departments reporting security teams abandoning positions. They can't maintain control while following required protocols. Shut down all emergency responses, Kane ordered his teams. Lock down every facility under our control. Can't do that, Watson countered through administrative channels. Agricultural Commission requires documented protocols for every emergency. Complete shutdown triggers automatic reporting. Sarah's veterinary experience proved crucial as they forced Kane's operation to fragment. Every ignored emergency creates evidence. Every broken protocol leaves a trail, just like Dad documented. He proved their corruption through their own procedures, Emily noted while directing tactical teams. Torres spotted critical movement through security feeds. Kane's implementing some kind of failsafe, armed teams entering multiple facilities. Let them, Sarah replied confidently. Every breach of emergency protocol creates more evidence, more proof of their real operation. Through facility systems, they watched ranch staff across the region fighting back with procedure and documentation. Every emergency response forced Kane's people to choose between maintaining cover and implementing control. You think procedures and protocols can stop this? Kane's voice carried cold amusement. We're creating a more efficient system. Sometimes progress requires sacrifice. Like sacrificing our father? Emily challenged while coordinating federal response. Show us the evidence you kept. Prove how necessary his death was for your progress. Watson's administrative access revealed the full scope of their operation. They're losing control of emergency services, can't maintain their takeover while handling actual veterinary crises. Multiple security teams abandoning positions, Torres reported. They're falling back to defensive protocols. Sarah coordinated with emergency departments across the region, using their combined veterinary expertise to systematically dismantle Kane's control. Every legitimate emergency forced his forces to fragment further. Your father thought he could expose us through paperwork, Kane announced, his composure cracking. Death by documentation, but some things require more direct solutions. Like cutting brake lines, Emily pressed while moving tactical teams into position. Making it look like an accident. Show us the proof you kept, Alexander. Show us how careful you were. Through command center monitors, they watched Kane's organization fracturing under the pressure of actual emergency responses. His forces couldn't maintain their takeover while following required veterinary protocols. Multiple facilities reporting security teams in retreat, Watson updated. They can't control emergency services without exposing their operation. Implement direct intervention, Kane ordered, abandoning all pretense of legitimate operation. Take control by any means necessary. Too late, Sarah countered, while coordinating medical response. Every breach of protocol is documented, every broken procedure recorded. James provided crucial confirmation. Emergency departments are fighting back with documentation, using their own procedures against them. Torres spotted Kane accessing secure files. He's pulling something from encrypted storage. Looks like archived security footage. Show us, Emily demanded through facility communications. Show us what really happened to William Mitchell. The command center's main screen flickered to life, displaying security footage from 7 years ago. Their father investigating suspicious ranch documentation, uncovering the same patterns they had exposed. Your father was an excellent investigator, Kane admitted, his voice carrying grudging respect. He understood that the best way to fight corruption was through documentation, every procedure, every protocol, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. Sarah watched the footage while coordinating emergency responses, seeing their father methodically building the same case they'd completed. That's why you kept the evidence, Emily realized while positioning federal response units. Insurance against your own organization. Insurance, Kane agreed coldly. Proof that we could handle internal threats efficiently. But now his voice hardened. Now you've forced us to abandon efficiency. Time for more direct measures. Through facility feeds, they watched armed teams entering multiple ranches. Kane was abandoning all pretense of legitimate operation, moving to seize control by force. Just made our case stronger, Emily noted while positioning federal response units. Every breach of protocol, every abandoned procedure proves criminal intent. Watson's administrative access revealed the final piece. They were exposing their entire operation. Can't maintain any pretense of legitimate security services now, Sarah coordinated with emergency departments across the region, using Kane's own protocols against him. Every response they ignored, every procedure they broke, built their case stronger. Through command center systems, they watched their father's last investigation being completed through their combined efforts. Veterinary expertise and tactical training working together to expose corruption. "Your father died trying to protect broken systems," Kane announced, his corporate facade completely gone. "Time to show everyone that progress can't be stopped by paperwork." "No," Sarah countered while implementing final emergency protocols. "Time to show everyone exactly what happened to William Mitchell. Time to finish what he started." The sisters exchanged determined looks as they prepared for direct confrontation. Everything their father had died exposing, everything they'd fought to uncover had led to this moment. The command center's main screen displayed the full truth of their father's murder as Kane's archived footage continued playing. William Mitchell documenting suspicious patterns in ranch records, building the same case his daughters would complete 7 years later. 3 months after Kane's arrest, the Mitchell Ranch's veterinary department had returned to its true purpose. Sarah Mitchell worked her regular shift treating animals without the shadow of corruption hanging over every procedure. Through the barn windows, she watched federal agents conducting final evidence collection. The full scope of the Iron Serpents operation had proven even larger than their father had suspected. Corrupt officials, compromised agricultural facilities, criminal enterprise hidden behind legitimate ranching services. "Multiple indictments coming down today," Emily announced, joining her sister during break. Her DEA work now focused on protecting agricultural infrastructure from similar corruption. Kane's entire network exposed, government contracts canceled, criminal assets seized. James fully recovered and reinstated as ranch manager, coordinated with staff at other freed facilities. Every operation implementing new safeguards using their father's methods. Documentation, procedures, proper protocols. "Speaking of documentation," Watson added, approaching with a thick folder. Her position as sheriff now focused on maintaining transparency. Federal investigators had finished analyzing the evidence from Kane's servers. Everything their father discovered, everything he died protecting, finally exposed. Sarah reviewed veterinary records while listening to status updates. Every procedure properly documented, every protocol serving its intended purpose, protecting animals instead of concealing crime. 6 more ranch administrators indicted, Torres reported through their secure channel, his inside knowledge having proven crucial in dismantling the entire criminal network. Complete exposure of agricultural corruption across 3 states. Emily studied the ranch's operations, seeing how her sister's veterinary expertise had helped restore proper procedures. Dad always said the best way to fight corruption was through documentation. Every protocol, every regulation designed to protect legitimate operations. "That's why Kane kept evidence of his murder," Sarah noted while checking animal charts. "Thought documenting efficient problem-solving would protect him. Instead, it proved premeditated crime." Through barn windows, they watched more federal teams arriving. The investigation had expanded to include higher-level conspirators, government officials who had enabled agricultural corruption for profit. "Remember what Dad used to say?" Emily asked quietly. "About systems being only as good as the people who maintain them?" Sarah nodded while treating her next patient. That's why he insisted on documenting everything, making sure proper procedures couldn't be corrupted without leaving evidence. James gathered senior staff for department updates. The ranch's normal rhythms had returned, but with new awareness of the importance of maintaining proper protocols. 28 ranches freed from criminal control, he reported. Every facility implementing safeguards based on your father's methods. Documentation protecting agricultural operations from corruption. Watson coordinated with ranch owners across the region, ensuring new transparency requirements. Complete overhaul of agricultural oversight. No more hidden ownership, no more compromised protocols. Through barn windows, Sarah and Emily watched their father's last case reaching its final resolution. Every ranch he'd investigated now, protected by the very procedures and regulations he died defending. Federal courts accepting all evidence, Torres updated through secure channels. Kane's own documentation proving every charge. Perfect record of criminal enterprise. The sisters moved through ranch rounds, their separate paths finally reunited in continuing their father's work. veterinary expertise, and tactical training, combining to protect agricultural systems from corruption. Multiple agencies implementing new oversight protocols, Emily reported, while observing treatment procedures, using Dad's methods to prevent similar criminal takeovers. Sarah treated animals while considering their father's legacy. He knew documentation was the best weapon against corruption. Every procedure, every protocol leaving evidence that couldn't be hidden. James coordinated with freed ranches throughout the region, agricultural operations reclaiming their true purpose, raising livestock instead of serving criminal enterprise. Complete exposure of government contract fraud, Watson announced, reviewing final reports. Criminal networks dismantled, corrupt officials indicted, agricultural systems restored. Through department operations, they watched proper ranching procedures replacing corrupt protocols. Every regulation their father had died protecting now serving its intended purpose. He would be proud, Emily noted quietly, not just of exposing corruption, but of protecting what these systems were meant for. Sarah checked her next patient's vital signs, remembering their father's dedication to proper documentation. That's why he taught us to trust procedures and protocols. They're not just regulations. They're safeguards against corruption. The ranch's normal rhythms continued as federal teams concluded their investigation. 7 years of separated paths had prepared the Mitchell sisters perfectly for protecting their father's legacy. "Ready for next shift?" Sarah asked her sister. Emily smiled, years finally bridged by shared purpose. "Ready. Time to show everyone how proper procedures really work." Through barn windows, they watched the sun rising over Paradise Valley. Every ranch their father had tried to protect, now freed from corruption. His methods of fighting through documentation and procedure finally proven right. The ranch's doors opened as new patients arrived. Sarah and Emily moved with practiced coordination, their separate skills combining perfectly to continue what their father had started. Protecting systems meant for feeding the nation. "He always said corruption thrives in shadows," Sarah noted while treating patients. Emily nodded, watching proper procedures replace criminal protocols. "That's why he taught us to document everything, shine light on every dark corner." The Mitchell sisters returned to their work, their father's legacy living on in every proper procedure, every documented protocol, every animal saved by systems protected from corruption. The very regulations Kane had mocked as outdated obstacles had proven to be the strongest weapons against criminal enterprise. Justice had finally come through the careful documentation of crimes, just as William Mitchell had believed it would. His daughters had completed his last case, protecting agricultural services from those who would corrupt them for profit. The ranch's rhythms continued, its true purpose restored. Every procedure documented, every protocol proper, every system serving its intended goal, caring for animals instead of serving corruption. Sarah and Emily Mitchell carried on their father's work, guardians against those who would sacrifice proper procedures for profit. Their separate paths had prepared them perfectly for protecting what he died defending, the systems and protocols designed to help people instead of exploit them. The sun rose higher over the Mitchell Ranch as another shift began in the veterinary department. Proper medical procedures continued serving their true purpose, protected by the very documentation and regulations that had exposed corruption. William Mitchell's last case was finally closed. Justice served through the methods he trusted: careful procedures, proper protocols, and thorough documentation of truth.